Hello, we're going to introduce the octave key on the saxophone today. It's important to introduce it in a way that's not overwhelming to young students. And it's also important to know that there are actually two octave keys on the saxophone. The first one, see if I can find a good way to show this to you, is right here. All right. It's kind of hard to see, I know. There's a little bitty key right here. This is the first octave key on the saxophone. And then the second one is up here on the neck. Excuse me, but both of them are controlled by the octave key right here. So back where your left thumb rest goes, you press that down and it activates both of those keys depending on which note you are trying to play on the saxophone. The way in which you introduce the octave key is important for young students. The first thing that you need to do is to leap into a note in the first octave key register and then work your way down in that register. The next step would be to start in that register and work your way down. And then the more challenging way for students in this octave key register is to go from a note below that first octave key register and then to step up into this first octave key register, also known as crossing registers, or some people actually say this term, crossing the break of the saxophone. We're going to introduce the first octave key here by looking at the Weber book on page 6. And there are a few lines in this that I would like to look at. It's line 5, 6, 7, and 8. In the Weber book on line 5 on page 6, you'll see we're playing a low F, going up to the first octave key, F, and then back down, up, and then back down. Now, it's important that when you're performing this, that we understand that F is fingered the same way for both the low octave and the octave above. The fingering for the F is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then with your octave key, you just add that, and it opens the first octave key to get that. Okay, so when I perform this for you, it's important to hear in your ear before you play this interval of an octave. La, 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 la. You have to have an expectation of what that sounds like in your mind and in your ear before you perform it. When using the octave key, I don't want you to think about changing anything in particular. When you're playing the low note and then ascending to the top note, I want you to think about increasing the airspeed. So you can just try that again. It's almost like the sound of wind increasing as you go up. If I tried to recreate that, it would sound like this. So in order to help us play into the first octave key register, I think you should think about increasing your air speed. Now remember, all of these notes should be articulated, so just lightly tongue when you get to the second note, third, fourth, and then the fifth note. Let's try that again. I'll count us off this time. You can play along. 1, 2, ready? And then exhale. One thing that we should be on the lookout in our young students and in our own performance is to not change the embouchure when we play into the first octave key register. Often you'll hear students really tense up in their sound. It'll get tight, and you'll see tension in their mouth too. They'll think, oh, I'm playing high, so I've got to work harder. That's not the case at all. The good news is that the saxophone's designed that when you press that key, as long as your embouchure is good, and relaxed and your air support is good and that your embouchure set where it should be on the mouthpiece, the reed's vibrating like it should be, that octave should come out with no problem. With those things in mind, try that again, and I don't want you to change anything here. Set your embouchure, no matter what register you're playing, it should remain the same, and just control your air. All right, I'll count us off. Ready? 1, 2, ready? So when we introduce the first octave key, I think it's important to not overwhelm the student with a bunch of notes. We're just taking one pitch here, and we're playing low F, and then the upper F, and then F, F, F. You can do that on E, D, E flat, etc. Now look at line 6 in the Weber book. We're going to play F, F, A, G, F, F, F. So try to get this sound in your ear before you play it so that you have an expectation of the sounds that you want to create. We're starting in the low register here, and then when we go up the octave, remember, don't change anything about your embouchure, just increase your airspeed. The tempo will be 1, 2, ready? The next step in getting comfortable playing the first octave key register is to, instead of leaping up at the interval of an octave, is to actually start on a note in the first octave key register and then play in a descending fashion. And then just kind of explore playing in that first octave key register without changing by going back down into the low register. In order to practice this, let's look at Weber page 6, line 7. When I put this on the screen, you'll see that we start on F, then we descend to E, to D, back up to F, E, and then D. And I'll show you what that looks like in the hands. F with the octave key depressed, E, D, F, F, E, E, D. All right? So again, think about ya, dee, da, 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 da. All of those notes are played with the octave key depressed. When playing in this register, you're going to notice that there's more resistance. Like when you put air into the instrument, you're going to feel a little bit more resistance when you compare that to playing in the low register, because you're now opening a hole up here at the top of the instrument and still using the same fingering. So the air is being split in a way that's a little bit more resistant in the feel. When playing in this register, make sure you keep your air speed up and that you play at this point at least a mezzo forte volume. 1, 2, ready? I now want to look at line 8 on page 6 in the Weber book. We're going to be playing almost exclusively in the first octave key register here, starting on E, going up to F and back down to D. We're going to breathe halfway through at the end of the 4th measure, and then we'll finish out the exercise. We continue to play in the first octave key register, except for the last note, we go down to a C. I will put this on the screen while we play this. 1, 2, ready? As a review, when teaching the first octave key register, remember to start very basic. Start only with intervals of an octave. The fingering stays the same, and you're only adding one key, which is the octave key. That way you can focus on matching the pitch of the octave and then coordinating the octave key with the thumb. Next, we encourage you to play in the first octave key register, starting there, and just getting comfortable playing with those pitches in the first octave key register. Embrace the resistance that you feel from the instrument and use fast air speed to play through that. Finally, when you're comfortable with both of those by leaping up at the interval octave, starting in the first octave key and working there, then you can start to include exercises or repertoire that go across that register from the low to the first octave key register. Happy practicing.